Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your appearance today and for your testimony. Many people voted for Donald Trump because he promised to make America great again by growing the economy and creating high-paying middle-class jobs by rebuilding America's crumbling infrastructure. Isn't that correct, Mr. Booker?
That's correct.
And Mr. McKenna, do you believe that we can make America great again by rebuilding our roads, bridges, and tunnels if we replace real federal gas tax revenues with public-private partnerships?
I believe it requires we do both.
Do you believe that one would be, or public-private partnerships alone can do it?
Well, you know, when I look to my left on this panel, public-private partnerships have existed in transportation for over 100 years. States, the federal government, and our construction industry. It's already in place.
Well, recently, the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal reported that President Trump stated that he no longer believes that public-private partnerships will solve our infrastructure funding needs. Do you disagree with President Trump?
I believe it's part of a tool in the toolbox. It's a procurement method. It's not necessarily a funding method. It's one of the tools that might help particular projects in particular regions of the country.
Well, my colleague from Illinois, my good friend, Representative Davis, asked you all to raise your hands if you believe that raising the gas tax alone will take care of the problems with the Highway Trust Fund, and it was duly noted that no one raised their hand, and none of you on the panel raised your hand. I want you to raise your hand if you believe that the federal gas tax will remain viable for fixing our crumbling infrastructure, given the fact that we have 253 million gas-powered vehicles on the roads in the country today versus only 540,000 electric vehicles. Raise your hand if you believe that the federal gas tax will remain viable to fix our crumbling infrastructure.
I'm struggling with remain viable.
I see 4 out of 5 with the transit guy not raising his hand, and I would love to ask him about that in a second, probably for a reason unrelated to the answer to the question. But I want you, so record reflects, you all believe that the gas tax is going to be viable. Now raise your hand if you believe that the gas tax should be increased. And I see 3, I see 4, I see 3, I see 4. I see a maybe out of one of the 4s. Mr. McCarty?
Yes, and the reason I'm hesitant is because I think it has to be part of an overall solution. It can be part of a package.
And that's not my question. My question is whether or not you believe that since 1993, gas tax has been at its current rate. Do you think it should be increased? That's my only question. And you did raise your hand, so right. Do you wish to retract it at this time?
No, I think it has to be part of the package. As I said, we're looking for something that's sustainable long term, and fuel tax will be one of those things that we have to do.
All right, and so Mr. Rogoff, would you please solve this mystery for us, why you did not raise your hand on
Well,
the question?
it's in part policy and it's a part parochial. As I pointed out earlier, the state of Washington has just increased its gas tax, the second increment of it, of a 12-cent gas tax increase. I work for a board of 17 elected officials. They do not, as I know, have a position on raising the gas tax. I would say this, importantly, transit is funded from a mix of trust fund dollars and general fund dollars. And in my written testimony, I talk about, I think, the need for transit expansion in America requires that we revisit the mix between programs. But I don't believe that all of the problems will be handled by a gas tax increase. And I think we probably should address the problems on a comprehensive basis, perhaps some combination of fuel taxes. I've also talked about the fact that Washington State is one of the few states that is actually piloting vehicle user charges. I think the committee needs to take a hard look at what will be sustainable, because the one thing you will hear unanimously from this panel is everyone wants sustainability and predictability in the program.
And thank you for that response, but I will ask whether or not these vehicle user fees are sufficient in rural areas.
I think the debate actually often goes in the other direction, which is to say rural users use the roadways more by definition, and how long it will take a rural resident to get to church or a shopping center versus an urban resident. The concern I have heard is that vehicle user charges can work a hardship on rural America, so I do not know
Right.
that it would necessarily work in that case.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Larson.